The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Henderson as Sergeant Maria Rodriguez made her rounds through the medical tent. At 26, she had already served 3 tours of duty and earned the respect of every soldier who had crossed her path. Her steady hands had saved more lives than anyone could count. And her calm demeanor under pressure made her the kind of medic every unit wanted on their side. Maria had grown up in a small Texas town where her father worked as a paramedic and her mother as a nurse. Medicine was in her blood, but it was the call to serve her country that led her to enlist right after high school. She completed her medical training at the top of her class and quickly proved herself in the field. Her fellow soldiers didn't see her as just another female soldier. They saw her as the person who would have their back when things went wrong. The base was buzzing with unusual activity that morning. Word had spread that General Thompson was making an unscheduled inspection tour. He was known throughout the military as a tough, old-school commander who demanded excellence and had little patience for anything he considered weakness. At 58, he had climbed the ranks through decades of service and had earned a reputation as someone who spoke his mind without regard for political correctness. General Thompson arrived at Camp Henderson with his usual entourage of aides and officers. He moved through the base with the confidence of someone who had seen everything the military had to offer. His inspection was thorough and demanding, as expected. He questioned procedures, examined equipment, and observed operations with the critical eye of someone who tolerated nothing less than perfection. When the general reached the medical facility, Maria was in the middle of treating a soldier who had suffered a minor injury during training exercises. She worked with her characteristic focus and precision, cleaning the wound and applying proper dressings, while explaining the care instructions to her patient. Her movements were efficient and professional, showing the kind of competence that had made her invaluable to the unit. General Thompson watched from the entrance for several minutes before stepping forward. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the tent. Conversations stopped, and everyone seemed to stand a little straighter. The general had a way of commanding attention without saying a word, and his reputation preceded him wherever he went. "Soldier," the general said, addressing Maria directly. End quote. His voice carried the authority of decades of command. "I've been watching your work. Your technique is adequate, but I have some questions about your methods." Maria looked up from her patient, meeting the general's gaze directly. She had dealt with difficult superior officers before, and she knew the importance of remaining professional regardless of the situation. "Yes, sir. What would you like to know?" The general stepped closer, his expression stern. "In my experience, field medicine requires quick decisions and absolute confidence. I've seen too many medics hesitate when lives are on the line. How do I know you won't crack under real pressure?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the medical tent could feel the tension building. Maria's fellow medics exchanged glances, knowing their colleagues' capabilities but uncertain how this confrontation would unfold. The patient she had been treating looked uncomfortable, caught in the middle of what was clearly becoming more than a routine inspection. Maria straightened her shoulders and responded with quiet confidence. "Sir, I've served in combat situations for over 5 years. My record speaks for itself. I've never lost a patient who could be saved, and I've never hesitated when someone's life depended on my actions." General Thompson's expression didn't change. If anything, he seemed more skeptical than before. "Records can be misleading, Sergeant. What I want to see is how you perform under immediate pressure. Real pressure. Not the comfortable environment of a base medical facility." The general turned to one of his aides and spoke quietly. Within minutes, word began to spread through the base that something unusual was about to happen. Soldiers started gathering at a respectful distance, sensing that they were about to witness something significant. The general's inspections were always thorough, but this felt different. "I'm going to test your abilities, Sergeant Rodriguez," the general announced. "I want to see if you truly have what it takes to serve in this capacity. Are you prepared for that?" 1. Maria nodded without hesitation. "Yes, sir. I'm ready for whatever test you have in mind." What happened next would become the talk of Camp Henderson for years to come. The general's challenge was about to reveal something that would change how everyone on the base viewed both leadership and service. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not just Maria's medical skills, but her courage, her principles, and her commitment to doing what was right regardless of the consequences. The other soldiers watched in silence as the general prepared his test. None of them could have predicted what was about to unfold, or how profoundly it would affect everyone present. The morning inspection had turned into something far more significant, and the entire base was about to learn a lesson that would stay with them long after General Thompson returned to his headquarters. Maria stood ready, her medical kit at her side and her resolve unwavering. She had faced enemy fire and saved lives under impossible conditions. Whatever the general had planned, she was confident in her abilities and her commitment to her duty. The test was about to begin, and the results would shock everyone who witnessed what happened next. The tension in the medical tent was almost visible as soldiers and medical personnel waited to see how this unusual confrontation would play out. General Thompson had a reputation for unconventional methods, but no one was quite prepared for what he was about to demand. The morning sun continued to shine through the tent's opening, but the atmosphere inside had grown heavy with anticipation and uncertainty. As the general outlined his intentions, it became clear that this would be no ordinary test of medical competence. The challenge he was about to present would push Maria to her limits and force her to make decisions that would reveal the true nature of her character. The base was about to witness something extraordinary, and the reverberations would be felt long after the dust settled on this unexpected confrontation. General Thompson reached into his jacket and pulled out what appeared to be a standard-issue military pistol. The sight of the weapon caused an immediate stir among the gathered soldiers. Several medics stepped back instinctively, while others moved protectively closer to Maria. The general's aide looked confused and concerned, clearly not having been briefed on this particular aspect of the inspection. "Sir, what exactly are you planning?" Maria asked, her voice steady, despite the obvious tension in the situation. Her medical training had taught her to remain calm in crisis situations, and that training was serving her well now. The general held up the pistol, checking it with practiced efficiency. "This weapon is loaded with blanks, Sergeant. I'm going to fire 5 shots in your direction. Your job is to remain calm and continue your medical duties without flinching or showing any sign of panic." Real combat medics face gunfire regularly while treating patients. "I need to know you can handle that pressure." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd of soldiers. Several officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. This was far beyond any standard inspection procedure, and many began to question whether the general was overstepping his authority. "General Thompson, sir," interrupted Major Williams, the base medical officer. "I'm not sure this is an appropriate way to evaluate Sergeant Rodriguez's capabilities. Her combat record already demonstrates her ability to work under fire." The general's gaze shifted to Major Williams with obvious irritation. "Major, I don't recall asking for your opinion. This soldier claims she can handle combat conditions. I'm simply providing her with an opportunity to prove it." Maria looked around at her colleagues and the gathered soldiers. She could see the concern in their faces, but she also understood what was at stake. Backing down from the general's challenge could be interpreted as weakness, potentially affecting not just her own career but also the perception of female soldiers throughout the unit. "I accept your test, sir," Maria said firmly. "But I request that my patient be moved to a safe distance first. Whatever this exercise is meant to prove, there's no reason to put an injured soldier at additional risk." General Thompson nodded approvingly. "Excellent point, Sergeant. See to it that the patient is relocated." As medical personnel carefully moved the injured soldier to safety, Maria prepared herself for what was to come. She had indeed faced gunfire before, both enemy rounds and friendly fire during chaotic combat situations. The difference here was that she knew the shots were coming, which in some ways made it more nerve-wracking than genuine combat conditions. The general positioned himself approximately 15 feet away from Maria's position. The distance was close enough to create genuine psychological pressure but far enough to ensure safety even if something went wrong with the blank rounds. The soldiers watching from nearby backed away further, giving the general a clear line of sight. "Begin your medical procedures, Sergeant," the general ordered. "I want you to demonstrate a complete trauma assessment and treatment protocol while under simulated enemy fire. Show me the competence you claim to possess." Maria moved to a medical training dummy that had been placed on the examination table. She began her assessment methodically, checking vital signs and examining for injuries just as she would with a real patient. Her movements were smooth and professional, showing no signs of nervousness despite the unusual circumstances. The first shot rang out suddenly, the blank cartridge producing a sharp crack that echoed through the medical tent. Maria's hands never paused in their work. She continued her examination without even looking up, her focus entirely on the task at hand. Several of the watching soldiers flinched at the unexpected sound, but Maria remained perfectly steady. The general waited several seconds before firing again. The second shot was just as loud as the first, but once again Maria showed no reaction. Her breathing remained even, and her hands continued their practiced movements. She was demonstrating the kind of professional calm that had made her reputation among the troops. By the third shot, it became clear that the general's test was having an impact on everyone present, except Maria herself. The watching soldiers were growing increasingly uncomfortable with the exercise, and several officers were exchanging meaningful looks. What had begun as an inspection was turning into something that felt more like harassment. The fourth shot rang out, and still Maria continued her work without interruption. She had moved on to applying simulated treatment procedures, demonstrating the same competence and precision she showed in real medical situations. Her performance was flawless, but the atmosphere in the tent was becoming increasingly strained. As the general prepared for his fifth and final shot, Major Williams stepped forward again. "Sir, I think Sergeant Rodriguez has more than proven her capabilities. Perhaps we can conclude this exercise." General Thompson ignored the major's suggestion and fired his fifth shot. This time, instead of continuing her work in silence, Maria straightened up and turned to face the general directly. "Test completed, sir," she said with quiet confidence. "I trust my performance met your expectations." The general lowered his weapon and studied Maria carefully. The soldiers and medical personnel watching held their breath, waiting to see how he would respond to her demonstration. The tension in the air was almost overwhelming, as everyone wondered what the general's verdict would be. What happened next surprised everyone present. General Thompson's stern expression began to change, and for the first time since arriving at the base, he looked genuinely impressed. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable to those who knew how to read military leadership. "Sergeant Rodriguez," the general said, his voice carrying a new tone of respect. "That was exactly the kind of performance I was hoping to see. You've demonstrated precisely the qualities this military needs in its medical personnel." The general turned to address the gathered soldiers and medical staff. "I want everyone here to understand what you just witnessed." This soldier showed perfect composure under pressure, maintained her professional standards despite deliberate distraction, and never once allowed external circumstances to compromise her patient care. Major Williams and the other officers looked confused by the sudden shift in the general's demeanor. What had seemed like an inappropriate and potentially dangerous exercise was apparently something quite different than they had assumed. "Sir," Major Williams ventured cautiously, "I'm not sure I understand the purpose of this particular evaluation method." General Thompson holstered his weapon and looked around at the assembled group. "The purpose, Major, was to demonstrate a point that I believe this base and this entire military needs to understand. What you just witnessed was a perfect example of what military medical personnel should aspire to achieve." The general's explanation was about to reveal the true nature of his exercise and why he had chosen to conduct such an unusual test. The soldiers and medical staff were about to learn that their assumptions about the morning's events had been completely wrong, and the real lesson was something far different than anyone had imagined. General Thompson walked over to Maria and extended his hand in a gesture of respect that stunned everyone watching. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I owe you an apology, and I owe this entire base an explanation." Maria accepted the handshake cautiously, still unsure where this conversation was headed. The general's sudden change in demeanor was as unexpected as everything else that had happened during the morning's inspection. 3 weeks ago, the general began, addressing the entire group. I received a formal complaint about this base. The complaint alleged that female medical personnel were receiving preferential treatment and were not being held to the same standards as their male counterparts. The complaint specifically mentioned Sergeant Rodriguez by name. A ripple of shock and anger passed through the gathered soldiers. Many of them had served alongside Maria and knew firsthand the quality of her work and her dedication to her duties. The idea that anyone would question her competence seemed absurd to those who had witnessed her performance in real combat situations. The complaint came from Colonel Harrison at divisional headquarters. The general continued. He suggested that female medics were being coddled and that their presence in combat units was compromising military effectiveness. He specifically requested that I conduct a thorough evaluation of this base's medical personnel. Major Williams stepped forward, his face showing a mixture of anger and disbelief. Sir, with all due respect, Sergeant Rodriguez has one of the finest service records in our medical corps. She's saved more lives than most medics see in an entire career. General Thompson nodded gravely. I'm well aware of Sergeant Rodriguez's record, Major. In fact, I've been following her career for some time. She's exactly the kind of soldier this military should be proud to have in its ranks. The general turned back to Maria, his expression serious but respectful. Sergeant, when I received Colonel Harrison's complaint, I knew I had to respond officially, but I also knew that any standard evaluation would be meaningless. I needed to create a situation that would demonstrate your capabilities in a way that could not be questioned or dismissed. Maria was beginning to understand what had really happened. So, the test with the gunfire was actually designed to prove my competence, not to question it. Exactly. The general confirmed. I needed to create an evaluation that was so challenging and so public that no one could claim the results were influenced by gender bias or political correctness. What better way than to test your performance under simulated combat conditions in front of witnesses? The general walked over to his aide and retrieved a folder from his briefcase. I want everyone here to understand something important. The performance you just witnessed is going to be documented in my official report to divisional headquarters. Sergeant Rodriguez demonstrated textbook perfect composure under fire, maintaining her professional standards despite deliberate psychological pressure. He opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Furthermore, I've brought with me commendations and promotion recommendations that have been pending in the bureaucratic system for far too long. Sergeant Rodriguez, effective immediately, you're being promoted to Staff Sergeant, and you're being recommended for the Medical Excellence Award. The announcement brought spontaneous applause from the gathered soldiers and medical personnel. Maria stood speechless, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. What had begun as what seemed like harassment had transformed into recognition and advancement. But there's more. General Thompson continued, raising his hand to quiet the applause. I'm also announcing some significant changes to this base's medical operations. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez is being appointed as the new senior medical trainer for all combat medic programs in this region. Major Williams looked surprised but pleased. Sir, that's a position that's been vacant for 6 months. We've been requesting authorization to fill it. Authorization granted, the general said firmly. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez will be responsible for training all incoming medical personnel and establishing new standards for combat medical operations. Her methods and protocols will become the baseline for evaluation throughout the entire division. The general then addressed the broader group of soldiers and medical staff. I want everyone here to understand the lesson from this morning's exercise. Military effectiveness has nothing to do with gender, race, or any other personal characteristic. It has everything to do with competence, dedication, and performance under pressure. He looked directly at several of the male soldiers who had been watching the proceedings. Some of you may have served with medics who didn't meet standards. That's a training and selection problem, not a gender problem. The soldier standing here proved this morning that she can outperform most of the medical personnel I've encountered in 30 years of military service. Maria finally found her voice. Sir, I appreciate the recognition. But I have to ask, was all of this really necessary? Couldn't my service record have spoken for itself? General Thompson's expression grew serious again. Under normal circumstances, yes. But Colonel Harrison's complaint wasn't just about you personally. It was part of a broader effort to limit opportunities for female soldiers throughout the medical corps. His recommendations could have affected the careers of hundreds of women currently serving. The general pulled out one final document from his folder. This morning's exercise and your performance have given me the evidence I need to not only dismiss Colonel Harrison's complaint, but to recommend that he be investigated for gender discrimination. Your demonstration was recorded by my aide, and copies will be sent to the Inspector General's office. The implications of the general's announcement were beginning to sink in for everyone present. What had seemed like a random inspection had actually been a carefully orchestrated response to a serious threat to military equality and effectiveness. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the general said formally, your performance this morning has helped preserve opportunities for countless female soldiers who will serve after you. You've also demonstrated the kind of leadership and professionalism that this military needs at all levels. As the general prepared to conclude his visit, he made one final announcement that left everyone on the base talking for months afterward. I'm also recommending that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez be fast-tracked for officer training. The military needs leaders who can perform under pressure and maintain their principles regardless of the circumstances. The transformation in atmosphere from the beginning of the morning to its conclusion was remarkable. What had started as a tense and uncomfortable situation had become a celebration of competence and a vindication of merit-based advancement. As General Thompson departed Camp Henderson, he left behind a base that had learned important lessons about leadership, fairness, and the true meaning of military excellence. Maria's calm performance under manufactured pressure had accomplished far more than just proving her own capabilities. It had struck a blow for equality and meritocracy throughout the entire military system. The story of the morning's events spread quickly through military channels, becoming a powerful example of how true leadership can triumph over prejudice and bureaucratic bias. Maria's 5 minutes under simulated gunfire had changed not just her own career trajectory, but had helped secure opportunities for future generations of military medical personnel. Years later, when soldiers at Camp Henderson told the story of the general who shot at the female medic 5 times, they always emphasized the same point. Sometimes the most important battles for military effectiveness are fought not against foreign enemies, but against ignorance and discrimination within the ranks. Maria Rodriguez had won such a battle that morning, and her victory had made the entire military stronger.